Real mental disorders that sound impossible. Your brain can convince you that you're dead. That you died weeks ago and your body is rotting. That you're transforming into a wolf, and you can feel the fur growing. That everyone you meet is the same person wearing different disguises. That your own mother is an identical imposter who replaced the real one. These sound like delusions. Psychotic breaks. The ravings of disturbed minds. And in a sense, they are. But they're also documented neurological conditions. Real disorders with consistent symptoms, identifiable brain damage, and medical names. They're not metaphorical. People genuinely experience these realities. Their brains create perceptions so vivid, so convincing, that no amount of logic or evidence can override them. They know their beliefs sound impossible. They can hear you explaining why they're wrong. But the experience is so powerful that rationality becomes irrelevant. Today we're exploring 4 mental disorders that sound like they can't possibly be real. Conditions so bizarre that early doctors dismissed patients as liars or attention seekers. Disorders that reveal just how fragile your grip on reality actually is. First, Cotard's delusion, the Walking Dead syndrome, where people are convinced they've died and are experiencing the afterlife while their bodies decay. Then, clinical lycanthropy, where patients genuinely believe they're transforming into animals, usually wolves. Third, reduplicative paramnesia, where the world duplicates itself and everyone becomes imposters wearing familiar faces. And finally, prosopagnosia, face blindness, where your brain loses the ability to recognize any face, including your own family and yourself in the mirror. By the end of this video, you'll understand that reality isn't objective. It's a construction your brain creates using sensory data and neural processing. And when that processing breaks, when specific circuits malfunction, reality becomes impossible. Nonsensical. Terrifying. These patients aren't crazy. Their brains are just showing them a different reality than yours. A reality that shouldn't be possible. But is. Let's begin with the disorder that makes you certain you've already died. Chapter 1. Cotard's delusion. When you're convinced you're dead, imagine waking up one morning with absolute certainty that you died during the night. You're still walking, talking, seeing, thinking. But you know you're dead. You can feel it. Your heart isn't really beating, it just seems like it is. Your body is beginning to rot from the inside. You're a corpse that hasn't realized it should stop moving. You look in the mirror and see decay. You smell death on your skin. You know, with complete certainty, that you are no longer alive. You're existing in some impossible state between life and death. A walking corpse. The living dead. This is Cotard's delusion. Also called walking corpse syndrome. And it's a real, documented neurological condition. People with Cotard's delusion genuinely believe they are dead. Not dying. Not feeling like death. Actually dead. Already deceased. Some believe they're experiencing the afterlife. Others think they're decomposing. Some insist they don't exist at all, that they are void, a nothingness pretending to be a person. The condition is named after Jules Cotard, a French neurologist who first described it in 1880. His patient, known as Mademoiselle X, was a 43-year-old woman who insisted she had no brain, no nerves, no chest, no stomach, no intestines. She believed she consisted only of decomposing skin and bones. She said she didn't need to eat because she was already dead. She died of starvation. Because if you're already dead, why eat? Cotard documented several similar cases. Patients who denied the existence of parts of their body. Who insisted they had no blood, no organs, no soul. Who believed they were damned, cursed to exist as corpses for eternity. Who demanded to be taken to the morgue because that's where dead people belong. He called it le délire de negation, the delirium of negation. The delusion of denying existence itself. Modern neuroscience has revealed what causes Cotard's delusion. It's related to a disconnect in your brain's emotional processing systems. Specifically, between the parts of your brain that recognize things and the parts that generate emotional responses to those recognitions. When you see your own face in a mirror, your fusiform face area recognizes it as your face. Simultaneously, your amygdala and other emotional centers generate a feeling of familiarity, of this is me. That emotional response is what makes recognition feel real. In Cotard's delusion, that emotional circuit is damaged or disconnected. You recognize your face intellectually, you know it looks like you, but there's no emotional confirmation. No feeling of me-ness. And your brain, confronted with this impossible situation, creates an explanation. You must be dead. That's why you feel nothing. That's why recognition feels hollow. The same disconnect extends to everything. You see the world but feel nothing toward it. You recognize people but feel no emotional connection. Food has no appeal. Pain feels distant and unreal. Your body feels foreign, like a puppet you're controlling from somewhere else. And the only explanation your brain can construct that makes sense of this emotional void is death. You died, and now you're experiencing existence without life. A consciousness without connection. One modern case involved a Scottish man named Graham. After attempting suicide, he developed Cotard's delusion. He insisted that he had died, that his brain was dead, and that he was experiencing the afterlife. He said he could smell his own flesh rotting. His mother took him on a trip to South Africa, thinking a change of scenery might help. Graham later reported that seeing South Africa convinced him he was definitely dead, because he felt nothing. I was in all these amazing places, he said, but I felt nothing. That proved I was dead. The lack of emotional response to objectively amazing experiences confirmed his delusion. His brain was showing him incredible sights but generating no emotional reaction. The only logical conclusion, to him, was death. Brain scans of Graham showed extensive deactivation in areas of his frontal and parietal cortex. His brain's metabolic activity was so low that it resembled someone in a vegetative state or under anesthesia. Yet he was conscious, aware, able to communicate. His brain was functioning at near-death levels while he remained conscious. In a very real sense, his brain was experiencing death while keeping him alive. No wonder he felt dead. Treatment eventually helped Graham. Medication and therapy slowly restored some emotional processing. His delusion faded. But the experience left lasting psychological scars. He had spent months genuinely believing he was dead. Living as a corpse. Existing in what he thought was the afterlife. Cotard's delusion manifests in different ways for different people. Some believe only parts of them are dead, their brain is dead, or their heart stopped, but the rest keeps functioning impossibly. Others believe they're rotting, they smell decay, see their skin discoloring, feel their organs dissolving. Some patients develop what's called nihilistic delusion. They believe nothing exists. Not just that they're dead, but that the entire world is gone. They're the only thing left, a consciousness floating in absolute void. Everything they see is an illusion. Everyone they interact with is a hallucination. One patient insisted she had destroyed the world. That her existence had somehow consumed all of reality, and now she was trapped alone in the ruins of existence. She could see people, but she knew they weren't real because she had destroyed reality itself. The most disturbing cases involve patients who believe they're immortal. They think they died but now exist eternally in a state of undeath. They're cursed to continue forever without truly living. They can't escape through death because they're already dead. One patient repeatedly attempted suicide because she believed she was already dead and wanted to prove she couldn't die again. Each failed attempt confirmed her belief. She couldn't die because she was already deceased. She was trapped in an impossible eternal existence. Cotard's delusion is often associated with severe depression. The emotional numbness of depression, taken to its logical extreme, becomes the conviction of death. If you feel nothing, if the world has no meaning, if existence is hollow, maybe that's because you're dead. Maybe depression is the experience of being a corpse that hasn't stopped moving yet. This isn't metaphorical. For Cotard's patients, it's literally true. They experience the symptoms of death, emotional emptiness, disconnection from the world, the absence of vitality, and their brains conclude the obvious: they must be dead. Treatment is possible. Medications that restore brain activity in deactivated regions can help. Electroconvulsive therapy has shown success in severe cases. Cognitive behavioral therapy, combined with medication, can slowly rebuild the emotional circuits that were damaged. But recovery is difficult because the delusion is self-reinforcing. Every experience confirms it. The lack of emotion proves you're dead. The absence of connection proves you're not really alive. Logic and evidence can't penetrate because the delusion explains everything. You can tell a Cotard's patient they're alive. Show them their heartbeat, their breathing, proof of biological life. And they'll acknowledge the evidence but dismiss it. Yes, my body is moving. But I'm not alive. I'm dead and this is the afterlife. Cotard's delusion reveals how dependent our sense of being alive is on emotional processing. Being alive isn't just biological function. It's the feeling of aliveness. The emotional confirmation that existence is real, that you're connected to the world, that your experience matters. Without that feeling, even if your body is functioning perfectly, you might as well be dead. Because if you feel dead, you are dead in the only way that matters to consciousness. But at least Cotard's patients retain their human form, even if they think they're corpses. Our next disorder is stranger. Because these patients don't just feel dead. They feel themselves becoming something else. Something non-human. Something that howls at the moon. Let's talk about clinical lycanthropy. Chapter 2. Clinical lycanthropy. When you believe you're transforming into an animal, you're sitting in your room when you feel it start. A tingling in your hands. Your fingers are changing. Growing. Hair is sprouting from your skin. Your face is elongating. Your teeth are sharpening. You drop to all fours because your body no longer wants to stand upright. You can feel your humanity slipping away as the animal takes over. You're transforming into a wolf. You can feel it happening. It's not metaphorical. It's not symbolic. Your body is physically changing. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. This is clinical lycanthropy. Not the folklore. Not the horror movie monster. A real psychiatric condition where people genuinely believe they're transforming into animals. And it's been documented for centuries. The term lycanthropy comes from Greek mythology. King Lycaon was transformed into a wolf by Zeus as punishment. The myth became a medical term in medieval times when physicians encountered patients who believed they were becoming wolves. In 1541, a man was tried in Padua, Italy, for claiming he was a wolf. He insisted that the only difference between him and a real wolf was that his fur grew inward, hidden beneath his skin. Physicians examined him, found no fur, and concluded he was delusional. In the 16th century, a Frenchman named Jean Grainy confessed to being a werewolf. He described feeling his body transform. Growing fur. Developing claws and fangs. Hunting and killing children while in wolf form. He was eventually committed to a monastery rather than executed, with physicians determining he was suffering from mental illness rather than demonic possession. Modern psychiatry recognizes clinical lycanthropy as a rare but real delusion. It's not classified as its own disorder but rather as a symptom of other conditions, typically schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or sometimes caused by brain lesions or drug reactions. Between 1850 and today, only about 50 cases have been formally documented in medical literature. But psychiatrists believe it's underreported because patients are terrified of being dismissed as insane. The documented cases reveal consistent patterns. Patients describe feeling their body change. Some report seeing fur grow on their skin. Others feel their skeletal structure shifting. Many drop to all fours and move like the animal they believe they're becoming. And it's not always wolves. One of the most detailed modern cases involved a 37-year-old woman admitted to a psychiatric hospital in Pennsylvania. She believed she was transforming into a cat. She would crouch on all fours, hiss, scratch at people who came near her, and lick herself as if grooming. She described feeling her face elongate into a snout, whiskers growing from her cheeks, claws extending from her fingertips. When doctors asked her to draw herself, she drew a cat. Another case involved a 49-year-old man who believed he was becoming a dog. He barked, walked on all fours, refused to eat unless his food was placed on the floor. He described feeling his face transform, his teeth sharpen, his hearing become more acute. He said he could smell things humans couldn't smell. Brain scans showed no structural abnormalities. His brain was intact. But his perception of his own body had completely broken down. There's even a documented case of a man who believed he was becoming a bee. He buzzed. Made flying motions with his arms. Described feeling his body shrink and his skin harden into an exoskeleton. He tried to fly out a hospital window and had to be restrained. The animal varies, but certain patterns emerge. Most patients transform into predators. Wolves, big cats, dogs. Occasionally prey animals or birds. The animal is almost always one the patient is familiar with. No one transforms into an exotic animal they've never encountered. What causes clinical lycanthropy? The leading theory involves disruption to your body schema, the mental representation your brain maintains of your body's shape, size, and boundaries. Your brain constantly processes proprioceptive information, signals from your muscles, joints, and skin that tell you where your body is in space and what it's doing. This information creates a stable sense of your body's form. You know you have 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso, a head. You know your boundaries. In clinical lycanthropy, this processing system malfunctions. The brain receives confused signals or misinterprets normal signals. The body schema becomes unstable. And the brain, trying to make sense of these impossible sensations, concludes, I'm transforming into something else. Some cases are linked to temporal lobe epilepsy. Seizures in the temporal lobe can cause intense hallucinations of body transformation. The patient feels their body changing, and the experience is so vivid that it overrides rational knowledge. Other cases are associated with psychotic episodes. During acute schizophrenic breaks, the boundary between self and other can dissolve. The patient loses their sense of human identity and adopts an animal identity instead. Sometimes permanently. There are also cases caused by drugs, particularly hallucinogens, bath salts, and certain designer drugs. These substances can trigger temporary lycanthropic delusions. Users feel themselves transforming and act accordingly, sometimes violently. Interestingly, the specific animal patients transform into often reflects cultural context. In Western cultures, wolves are most common because of werewolf mythology. In Asian cultures, patients more often report becoming foxes or big cats. In regions where crocodiles are culturally significant, crocodile transformations have been documented. One case from Ethiopia involved a man who believed he was becoming a hyena. He laughed hysterically, mimicking hyena vocalizations, and scavenged for food. He described feeling his jaw extend and his teeth sharpen for tearing flesh. This suggests that clinical lycanthropy isn't just a neurological malfunction. It's shaped by cultural narratives. Your brain, malfunctioning, reaches for culturally available explanations for impossible sensations. In cultures with werewolf legends, you become a wolf. In cultures with fox spirit legends, you become a fox. The experience is genuinely terrifying for patients. They're losing their humanity, becoming something primal, instinctual, non-human. They can feel it happening and can't stop it. Their mind is still human, they can think, reason, understand, but their body is betraying them. One patient described it as feeling the animal inside me trying to get out. I'm still myself, but there's something else here now. Something that wants to hunt. And I don't know how long I can keep it contained. Some patients welcome the transformation. They feel more authentic as an animal than they ever did as human. They describe relief, liberation, the shedding of human constraints and expectations. They don't want to be cured. They want to complete the transformation. Treatment for clinical lycanthropy typically involves antipsychotic medication. Drugs that stabilize dopamine and reduce hallucinations can often resolve the delusion. Patients gradually regain their human sense of self. The transformations stop. But some patients resist treatment. They insist they're not delusional. They're genuinely transforming, and the medication is preventing it. They experience treatment as an attempt to trap them in human form when they've already begun becoming what they're meant to be. In cases linked to brain damage or epilepsy, treating the underlying condition often resolves the lycanthropy. Seizure medication can stop the transformation experiences. Brain lesions, if treatable, can restore normal body perception. But for some patients, especially those with chronic schizophrenia, the delusion persists despite treatment. They spend their lives feeling like they're caught between human and animal, never fully one or the other. Clinical lycanthropy reveals how fragile our sense of species identity is. We assume we're human because we have human bodies. But human is also a category our brains create. And when the brain malfunctions, that category can dissolve. Your experience of being human depends on your brain correctly interpreting signals from your body. When those signals become confused, when your body schema breaks down, anything becomes possible, including transformation into something non-human. And the most disturbing part, from inside the experience, the transformation feels completely real. More real than reality itself. Because perception is reality when your brain creates both. But at least with lycanthropy, you're still you, just changing form. Our next disorder is even more unsettling. Because with this condition, you're surrounded by duplicates. Everyone you meet might be someone else in disguise. Every place might be a copy. Reality itself has been duplicated, and you're the only one who notices. Let's talk about reduplicative paramnesia. Chapter 3. Reduplicative paramnesia, when reality duplicates and everyone becomes an imposter. You're in the hospital. You know you're in the hospital. The doctors tell you you're in New York City. But you know that's impossible. Because you're actually in the duplicate hospital. The real one is still in New York, but someone built an exact copy somewhere else, maybe Philadelphia, maybe across the country, and moved you there during the night. The doctors insist you're wrong. They show you address signs, maps, windows overlooking New York landmarks. But you know better. This is a duplicate. Everything looks identical because it was designed to fool you. But you can tell. Something is off. This isn't the real place. Or maybe it's your wife who's been duplicated. She looks exactly like your wife. Sounds like her. Knows everything your wife would know. But she's not her. She's an imposter. A duplicate. A replacement. The real one is somewhere else, and this copy is pretending to be her. This is reduplicative paramnesia. The delusion that places, people, or events have been duplicated. That reality has copied itself, and you're surrounded by identical duplicates pretending to be the originals. Reduplicative paramnesia typically occurs after brain damage, usually to the right hemisphere, particularly the frontal and parietal lobes. Head injuries, strokes, brain tumors, or neurological diseases can cause it. The term was coined in 1903 by Czech neurologist Arnold Pick. His patient insisted she was simultaneously in Pick City Clinic and in a duplicate clinic elsewhere. She could see she was in the clinic. She recognized it. But she also believed there was another one somewhere else, and she was in both at the same time. This wasn't a simple confusion. She understood the logical impossibility. She acknowledged that being in two places at once made no sense. But the belief persisted despite the contradiction. Reduplicative paramnesia manifests in several distinct forms. The most common is place reduplication, believing a location has been duplicated. One famous case involved a patient who, after a stroke, insisted that the hospital she was in had been moved from Boston to her hometown. Same building, same staff, same everything, just relocated. When shown windows overlooking Boston landmarks, she claimed they'd been moved too. Or that what she was seeing was a very convincing fake. Another patient believed the hospital existed in multiple locations simultaneously. He was in one version, but identical copies existed in other cities. Sometimes he was in one copy, sometimes another. He couldn't always tell which one he was currently in. One patient insisted that her house had been duplicated. She lived in the real one, but occasionally she'd enter the duplicate by mistake. The duplicate looked identical but felt wrong. She could tell the difference, even though no one else could. A more disturbing variant is Capgras syndrome, the belief that people, usually loved ones, have been replaced by identical imposters. Patients with Capgras syndrome look at their spouse, parent, or child and recognize them intellectually. They can see that this person looks exactly like their loved one. But emotionally, something is wrong. The feeling of familiarity is absent. And the brain, confronted with this impossible situation, I recognize them but don't feel they're them, creates an explanation, they've been replaced. This is an imposter. A duplicate. A copy wearing my loved one's face. One of the most heartbreaking documented cases involved a man whose wife had a stroke and developed Capgras syndrome. She looked at him and said, "You look exactly like my husband, but you're not him. Where is he? What have you done with my real husband?" Nothing he could say or do convinced her. She would look at wedding photos and acknowledge, "Yes, that's my husband. But you're not the man in these photos. You're someone else pretending to be him." Imagine living with someone you love for decades. Then one day they look at you with suspicion and fear. They recognize your face but insist you're not you. You're an imposter who replaced their real spouse. And no amount of evidence, shared memories, matching DNA, identical appearance, can convince them otherwise. Some Capgras patients believe their loved ones have been replaced multiple times. They'll accept one imposter eventually, only to later decide that this imposter has been replaced by yet another imposter. An infinite regression of duplicates replacing duplicates. One patient believed his children had been replaced dozens of times. Every few days, new imposters would show up pretending to be his kids. He kept lists trying to track which versions were which. Another patient believed his wife was replaced every night while he slept. Each morning he woke up to a new duplicate. Sometimes he liked the new version better than the previous one. Sometimes he demanded the old duplicate back. There's also an opposite delusion called Fregoli delusion, named after the Italian quick-change artist Leopoldo Fregoli. Patients believe that different people are actually the same person in disguise. A woman with Fregoli delusion believed that a man she knew was following her by taking on different appearances. The mailman, her neighbor, a stranger in the grocery store, all the same man wearing different disguises. She could recognize him despite his disguises because she could sense his presence. Another patient believed that several people in his life were all his therapist in disguise. His boss, his brother, random people on the street, all secretly his therapist, testing him, watching him, following him everywhere. With Fregoli, every stranger might be someone familiar. The world is full of one person wearing countless masks. You're being followed by someone who can look like anyone. Paranoia becomes inescapable. What causes these reduplication delusions? The leading theory involves damage to the right hemisphere, particularly areas that integrate perception with emotional recognition and spatial awareness. Your brain has separate systems for intellectual recognition and emotional familiarity. You recognize a face with your fusiform face area. You feel the emotional response, "This is familiar," with your amygdala and other limbic structures. Normally, these systems work together seamlessly. But when brain damage disrupts the connection, you get intellectual recognition without emotional confirmation. You see your wife. You know intellectually that this person looks like your wife. But the feeling of wifeness is absent. No emotional warmth. No sense of familiarity. Your brain tries to resolve this contradiction. This person looks exactly like my wife, but doesn't feel like my wife. The only explanation that makes sense: she's been replaced by an imposter. Similarly, with place reduplication, you recognize a location intellectually but lack the emotional and spatial confirmation. You're in a hospital. You can see it's a hospital. But it doesn't feel like the right hospital. The spatial context feels wrong. So your brain concludes, this must be a duplicate. The delusions are attempts to make sense of impossible perceptual experiences. When your brain gives you contradictory information, recognition without familiarity, perception without emotional confirmation, it creates narratives to explain the contradiction. And those narratives, once formed, become unshakable. Because they explain everything. Every piece of evidence that contradicts the delusion can be reinterpreted to support it. Living with reduplicative paramnesia is psychologically devastating. For place reduplication patients, they're trapped in a world that looks right but feels wrong. Everything is slightly off. They can't trust their environment because it might be a duplicate. For Capgras patients, it's even worse. They're surrounded by imposters wearing familiar faces. The people they love have been stolen and replaced. They're alone in a world of duplicates, pretending to be the real people. One Capgras patient described it as living in a nightmare where everyone I know has been kidnapped and replaced by actors. They're very good actors. They know all the right things to say. But I can tell they're not real. And I don't know what happened to the real people. The families of Capgras patients suffer tremendously. Imagine your mother looks at you with suspicion and fear. Asks what you've done with her real child. Refuses to let you touch her because you're an imposter. You can see the pain in her eyes. She's lost her child, from her perspective. And there's nothing you can do to prove you're really you. Some families adapt. They accept that their loved one believes they're imposters and try to build a relationship with them anyway. I'm not your real husband, but I care about you. It's heartbreaking, but it allows for some connection. Others can't handle it. The rejection is too painful. They distance themselves, which confirms the patient's belief, the real family member is gone, and these imposters are abandoning them. Treatment for reduplicative paramnesia is difficult. It's usually caused by brain damage that can't be reversed. Medication can sometimes reduce the intensity of the delusion, but rarely eliminates it entirely. Cognitive behavioral therapy has limited success. You can't logic someone out of a delusion caused by brain damage. Their brain is giving them contradictory sensory information, and the delusion is their best attempt to make sense of it. The most effective approach is often validation and redirection. Don't argue about whether the hospital is duplicated or whether the person is an imposter. Accept the patient's reality and work within it. I understand you believe I'm not your real son. That must be frightening. How can I help you feel safe? Some patients gradually adapt. The delusion persists, but they learn to function despite it. They accept living in the duplicate hospital. They maintain relationships with the imposters even while believing they're not the real people.